Hello, everyone. I want to thank you guys for joining our very special webinar today. We're going to get going in just a minute here, but as everybody comes into the room, everyone is just on silent mode, as a typical webinar is. If anybody has any questions throughout the webinar today, feel free to chat them into the question section. It should be just a little section sort of at the bottom of your control panel. You can also raise your hand. It's sort of a feature within GoToWebinar if you have a pertinent question. We're going to get to all the questions at the end of the webinar. I'll set the agenda in just a second. So if you chime in with a question and we don't happen to answer it right away, it's not that we didn't see it. It's just that we handle questions really at the end. We want to get through a lot of the good content that we have today. So with that said, we're going to take about 55 minutes today. We'd like to keep it under an hour. The agenda is going to be pretty straightforward. In collaboration with our sponsors, we're bringing two really great subject matter experts to the table today. They're going to discuss the COVID-19, the coronavirus's impact on the home services industry, and really how to manage change in your business through some of these challenging times. So we're really excited to get into that content. The response to this has been incredible. So it's definitely on the top of everybody's minds. It's subject matter that's super interesting. So with that, I do want to get started here. And before we jump into the actual content and I bring in our guest speakers, I wanted to just acknowledge our sponsors quickly. So we actually have 4 sponsors today. CompanyCam, if you aren't familiar with CompanyCam, they're a photo solution that gives fully organized photo feeds to your businesses. So CompanyCam, look, it's really hard to keep everybody on the same page through a project, like a home improvement project. So having a web-based a single place where all of the people involved with selling and installing a job can come for those really important images. CompanyCam does a fantastic job with that. So if you're not familiar with CompanyCam, definitely check them out. We're going to have a little bit more information about them at the end of the webinar today. Webrunner is really one of the up-and-coming leading companies when it comes to lead generation. This is a great new partner of ours at Leap, actually. So we're doing some pretty cool things with them over the next year. But they really generate leads through quite a bit more data-driven predictability. So yes, they have the great sort of pay-per-click advertising campaign. Yes, they have high converting landing pages, but their approach really helps bring exclusive leads overnight to a business while bringing a lot of visibility to the brand, both in the immediate and then also ongoing. So really, really cool company. And again, we'll have more on them at the end of the webinar. Eagleview, this is our third sponsor for the webinar. Eagleview, if you aren't familiar with Eagleview, I don't think there's a better time to take a look at a company like Eagleview, especially with remote selling really becoming almost a necessity to sustain your business as we sort of weather this storm. But Eagleview, if you're not familiar, creates high resolution images through aerial imaging. That what that does is it provides really exact measurements down to contractors, along with a very detailed, highly valuable reporting set that can be used in both pre-sale and post-sale. So if you're not familiar with Eagleview, definitely check them out. As I said, there's probably no better time to check out a company like Eagleview now that remote selling is really something that you have to look at for your business. And then our final sponsor, Leap, this is actually a company that I work for. So if you aren't familiar with Leap, Leap is a virtual and in-home point of sale tool. So our customers use Leap to digitize every stage of the selling process: estimating, financing, contracting, and then communicating all of that data to the relevant parties that are involved: the homeowner, the home office, the third parties that may be relevant in the sale. In times like this, having a system selling process in place is really important, and having a way to digitally sell your products. A lot of our customers are, their sales reps are sitting at home. They're using Leap in conjunction with Eagleview to provide a complete selling process virtually to their customers, to their homeowners, so they're not missing appointments. And then the appointments that they do run, they're able to sell with the same kind of efficiency and at the same margins and price points that they would have sold if they were actually standing in the home. So if you aren't looking at digital tools like Leap and Eagleview and Webrunner and CompanyCam right now, there's no better time to do that, as we have a little bit of downtime right now to really work on the business and bring in tools that can help strengthen your business for those sort of remote selling scenarios. So with that, I do want to bring in two guest speakers that we're having today. Mr. Anirban Basu is Chairman and CEO of Sage Policy Group. He's really an economic and policy expert located here in the Baltimore, Maryland area. The firm provides strategic analytical services to energy suppliers, law firms, medical systems, government agencies, and real estate developers, among others. In 2014, Governor Hogan appointed him chair of the Maryland Economic Development Commission. He also serves as chairman of the Baltimore County Economic Advisory Committee, and he's also chief economist to Associated Builders and Contractors and chief economic advisor to the Construction Financial Management Association. He serves or has served in similar functions for Visit Baltimore, Maryland Realtors, and Markham LLC. So very esteemed guests. We're happy to have him today. We're also fortunate enough to be joined by Aaron Magden. Aaron's president and co-founder of Window Nation. Window Nation is one of the largest home remodeling companies in the U.S. And under Aaron's guidance, they've created a really unique selling system that's revolutionized the industry. They really shy away from that high pressure in-home consultation. The Window Nation approach is much more customer focused and designed to meet the needs of each individual homeowner first and foremost. So Aaron actually leads the entire Window Nation sales operation across all across all offices in 7 metropolitan areas. So very, very excited to have Aaron. Aaron's going to join us more at the tail end of the webinar to talk a little bit about change management in business. But before we do that, I do want to bring in Mr. Basu. So with that, Mr. Basu, can you hear us?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. So I'm going to make you presenter, and I'm going to throw it over to you to run through your presentation and your content. And then whenever you're ready, just let me know, and I'll take controls back, and we'll finish out the webinar.
Right, wonderful. So thank you all for engaging in this and not throwing up your arms and calling it a day. And so I'm going to talk about the economics as we understand it of COVID-19, the economic impact on the home services industry. I want to thank all of the wonderful sponsors for making this possible. I have about 20 minutes to talk through these things, so I might be a bit brisk, but I want to also give way to our other speakers, and I also want to hear from you in the form of questions and try to address that. So let's get started. So first, I want to begin with the following point. We entered this period with enormous economic momentum, and you are aware of this. Here I'm showing you monthly job growth in America back to February of 2002, so there are precisely 18 years of data here. I'm just using this one slide to point out how much momentum this economy enjoyed early in January 2020 and into February. We added 277,000 net new jobs as a country in January. We followed up with 273,000 net new jobs in February. This nation had added jobs for 113 consecutive months, more than 22 million jobs added over that period. Unemployment at 3.5%, effectively a 50-year low. Some of the fastest wage growth we've seen in roughly a decade. Amazon raising its minimum wage to $50 an hour. Bank of America $20 an hour, and you could go on with the anecdotes. Obviously, a raging stock market, rising home prices, and you know what the miracle was? The miracle was this. I mean, I have to tell you that much of the last 2 years as an economist, I have spent unlearning economics. Because one of the things that I had been taught was that when you have lower unemployment, you have higher inflation. And higher inflation produces higher interest rates. But the miracle in some sense of this expansion has been that though it has been so durable until now, though it has been so profound in terms of job creation, though there's been such a scramble for human capital, and though wages have been rising, overall inflation has been benign. By a very prominent measure, the core PCE, or personal consumption expenditures deflator, just 1.6% over the past year. And so for the home services industry and for the home remodeling industry, this is a perfect setup, isn't it? lots of job growth, more spending power, and low borrowing costs for consumers, including consumers who have on many occasions during this cycle, refinanced, including in the form of cash out refinancing. But with that expansion, which would have begun its 12th year in June, we would have completed 11 years, had it not been for the coronavirus. With that, we built a massive vulnerability, because with those low interest rates came a significant amount of debt accumulation. Here I'm showing you various flavors of household indebtedness. In orange is mortgage. In red is student loans. In blue is credit cards. I mean, you can see how much student loans have climbed over the last 16 years or so, that red segment there. But mortgages as well. So I mean, in nominal terms, consumers have never been so indebted. And I liken this to an army that's been moving down the battlefield aggressively, charging toward the enemy. And because they're moving down the battlefield so aggressively, no one has quite realized that the wheels on the jeeps have become loose, and the gunpowder has become soggy, and the soldiers are tired. And you can keep the soldiers going by, giving them some caffeine, meaning in this case, tax cuts. And you can give them some sugar in the form of, ultra low interest rates. And then you can also, keep pushing this forward by, expanding federal government spending, which we have seen. But all of this produces massive amounts of indebtedness. Corporate debt in America coming to this period had never been greater, historical high. The federal government's budget deficit has been setting records, and the national debt has been screaming towards $23.5 trillion. So even as we had this momentum, we had this vulnerability. That matters, because the word for my presentation, or my part of the presentation, is fragile. We were fragile coming into this coronavirus period. And here's the other aspect of this. This is not like 2007, 2008, 2009. That was a demand shock. What happened there? People started missing their mortgage payments in large numbers in late 2005 into 2006. By the second quarter of 2006, it became an epidemic of sorts in terms of missed mortgage payments. So credit began to tighten up. The buyers began to disappear. Home prices began to fall. All of a sudden, even more people started losing jobs, and fewer people started making their mortgage payments. Credit tightened further. Then you have banks like Lehman Brothers and Bear Stearns in difficult straits. And so the liquidity vanished. The capital vanished. Well, you can solve that. So the air comes out of the balloon. The air comes out of the balloon, meaning the money in the economy comes out of the economy. So what do? You put money, you pump money back into the economy. You put air back into the balloon. You have the Troubled Assets Relief Program. You recapitalize the banks. You lower interest rates. You have quantitative easing. You address the demand shock. Not to say that period was not very painful. Of course it was. But at least we had clear tools about how to deal with this and get this economy back on the right track. And I think you could argue it worked. That fueled the lengthiest expansion cycle in American history. But this is a supply shock. People can't get to work. Factories are closing, whether GM, Ford, or other factories. Supply chains are disrupted around the world. Quarantines, travel bans and restrictions, closure of public places. And so that's a supply shock. And you can't just put money back into the economy and all of a sudden people are going back to work. No, because that's not what it's about, as you know. Now, as it turns out, that supply shock, and that's what this graph is trying to get at, that supply shock then creates a demand shock, because now people can't get to work. That's a supply shock. And now their incomes fall, whether they drive Ubers or Lyfts or work for restaurants. And now not only can't they get to work, they can't pay their bills. And panic starts to set in pretty quickly. And you can see this, this economy melt away, this momentum melt away pretty quickly. And so this is starting to show up in forecasts, of course. And look at the second bullet here, for instance. I've got a lot of stuff here, but the International Monetary Fund, or IMF, now expects 2020 world growth to be below last year's 2.9% rate. Tell me something I don't know, obviously. But I have to tell you something. We economists have come to this party in a quite slow fashion, meaning I don't think that we have recognized until very, very recently how damaging this is. I think until a few days ago, you might have heard some economists say, yeah, we can still avoid recession. And maybe you can still hear those folks. I don't see how. So last year was a very weak year for the global economy, affected by Brexit and trade wars and so on and so forth. The expectation was that this year was going to be better. We got that first phase trade deal with China. We got the ratification of the USMCA, the US-Mexico-Canada Trade Agreement, the so-called new NAFTA. And so that alleviated some of the uncertainties surrounding global supply chains. And then because of Boris Johnson's resounding victory in the United Kingdom late last year, we got some certitude there. So the expectation was that the global economy would burst forth like spring into 2020. And so the forecast coming to this year was 3.3% for the global economy. Not fabulous, but better than in 2019. And now all of that has gone away. And then, of course, we economists are wrestling with how much of that will be lost. Here's some information from Oxford Economics, really wonderful forecasting outfit. They do a lot of economic analysis. But, you know, they've talked about the weakness of China, the world's second largest economy. They now project that global growth will slow to just 2.3%. That's the final bullet. That third bullet includes that language there. It's weakest since 2009. So here we are in this crisis. And by the way, from an American perspective, one could argue that this crisis is less than 3 weeks old. Why do I say that? Because it was a couple of weeks ago that the Dow Jones fell 1,000 points. And that's when people began to wake up to the fact that this really was different. You might remember that during the early weeks of this coronavirus now pandemic, the stock market was actually rising. Underpricing risk, undoubtedly. And now you can see, obviously, as I'm speaking to you now, the Dow Jones is trading at 19,940. It was around 29,500 a few weeks ago. Last month, it set an all-time high, and it was seemingly setting all-time highs, on a daily basis. So, Goldman Sachs, for its part, it is estimated that the impact will be a reduction of 5 percentage points of growth for the first quarter of 2020. That's the second bullet here. They expect global growth will slump to around 2% now. So you can see that as you get these new forecasts, everyone is ratcheting down their expectations. They have projected that America will grow around 0.9% in the first quarter of 2020 and will not grow at all in the second quarter of 2020. Look, that's an old forecast. We now have many economists indicating that this economy could, during the second quarter of the year, meaning the quarter that begins in April, will shrink 14 or 15% on an annualized basis. That in terms of output, America's economy will be around 4 or 5% smaller during the second quarter than it is on the first quarter. So on an annualized basis, if you do the math, if that lasts for 4 quarters, you get a humongous impact. But I mean, what can I tell you? This is the nature of the decline. This gives you some more further sense of Oxford Economics and their forecast. So you see that dark blue or black line on this slide? That was their January forecast for the global economy. That was the world GDP forecast. You see the red line? That's the adjusted forecast. Now here's what's interesting, and you'll see this, or one of the things that's interesting. You'll see this in many forecasts. Our presumption as economists is that this will be a V-shaped recession. Again, you might find some economists who don't think it's going to be a recession. I think it's unavoidable. I think the recession's already begun. But set that aside. A V-shaped recovery. And I've characterized this period of economic history as short and vicious. I'll talk about why I think that later on, but you can sort of see that sort of the big dip in economic activity when you look at that red line, and then the expectation that things come really roaring back. And I'll talk about why that expectation probably makes some sense. Here's another way. These are Goldman Sachs data. Too many lines on here by half, by the way. But this gets at sort of what was happening during previous pandemics. SARS in China, 2003. Avian flu in the US, 1957, so on and so forth. You see that light blue line that really goes up high on this slide? That's Hong Kong, 2003, their SARS epidemic. But notice here, if you look at this slide, what I'm trying to show you here is there are a lot of V's here. That 0% line, that's average growth. That's average economic growth. So during the early stages of the crisis, what do you see? You see below average growth. And then the economy bounces back quite quickly. And this last bullet here on this slide, the average episode saw a GDP hit of 4 to 5% in the first 2 quarters after the outbreak. So the variation was substantial. But then the bounce back is really quite profound. And we'll talk about why that is in a moment. Various policy options to try to deal with the economic implications of this. Obviously, number one, right there in that blue box, right at the northwest corner, increase resources to the health sector. Obviously, that's part of the, the thinking right now, whether it's in the form of ventilators or masks or gowns or, hospital ships going to New York and California, so on and so forth. Step up temporary cash transfers to vulnerable households so they can try to make at least part of their rent payment. Try, if you can, to get some people to get to work even for short periods while maintaining social distancing. That's that short-time work scheme. Firms, a lot of us are small business owners, myself included. We're thinking about our bills and our payroll and so on and so forth. We have to let go of staff. This is a tough time. There's no winning in the downside of this V. What you're trying to do is try to reduce damage. And try to hold on to your folks, especially the folks that you're going to have difficulty replacing when the upturn begins. Because then the upturn is going to be profound. We're going to talk about that. The upturn is going to be great. But you got to have people on your teams to participate fully in that upturn. By the way, the Dow Jones just passed 20,000 and is up 120 points. Hope remains. Keep hope alive. So what about the home services industry? So there are a couple of things happening here. One of the things that we've seen recently is that interest rates have plummeted. Mortgage rates presumably will follow suit. So you might have noticed a few days ago, the yield on the 10-year Treasury fell to 0.318%, an all-time low. As I'm speaking to you now, the yield on the 10-year Treasury is a bit above 1%, but still very low by historic standards. It's 1.112% as I speak to you now. And so one might think, well, with those low interest rates, more consumers might think about refinancing and cash out refinancing, and that might actually give them the wherewithal to invest in some home remodeling projects. Unfortunately, what we find is that during economic downturns, even though interest rates tend to fall, construction activity generally tends to fall. And I'll show you some more specific data on that in a moment. But that last bullet here, an analysis by the Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis found that for every 1% change in total U.S. employment, construction employment changes by 3%. In fact, construction is one of the most cyclical industries in America. It is a wonderful industry in which to be when times are good. It is devastating when times are bad. And many of you remember that during the economic downturn, the previous economic downturn, construction lost about 2 million jobs. And it was one of the hardest hit sectors in percentage terms and also in absolute terms in terms of job loss. And so one could argue, okay, low interest rates is good, but is that effect overwhelmed by the general weakness of the economy? And the answer is it is. That the major force here on remodeling, and this is the NAHB's Remodeling Market Index graph back to 2001, when the economy turns down, yes, interest rates have a tendency to fall, but that effect does not offset the impact of general economic weakness. So you can see that here. When do we see this index reading below 50, meaning that remodeling activity is stagnating or worse? You see it during the 2001 recession, for instance. That recession began in March of 2001 and ended in November of 2001. We then had this incredible period of low interest rates thereafter, and so remodeling actually picked up by 2002 just a bit. But then once that wave ended, you can see again it turns negative, or at least below 50 by 2002 into 2003. Then the recovery takes hold. You'll remember those are very good years for the new home sales market in particular. A lot of people were buying new homes. The index is above 50 here, but a lot of the capital went to purchase of new homes as opposed to remodeling existing ones. Then you can see as we approach the recession of 2007, 2008, 2009, remodeling market is a leading indicator. It sinks first. It first turns below 50 for that cycle during the fourth quarter of 2005. The fourth quarter of 2005 was 2 full years before the beginning of the recession. Then you can see how awful it was by late 2008 and early 2009. It doesn't come up for air again, meaning back above 50, until the third quarter of 2012, and then again during the first quarter of 2013. And then the economy takes off, we're adding lots of jobs, remodeling activity comes back. But this is pro-cyclical. And what I'm telling you now is the economy has entered a recession. So you can understand what that means for the remodeling market. And having ultra low interest rates, unfortunately, is not a total cure for that. It might help at the margin. There might be some folks out there who realize, my goodness, this is a great time to do a remodeling project. My borrowing costs are low, and contractors may not be that busy and may be really aggressively looking for work. I might get a good deal. And they would be right, by the way. That economic thinking is correct. Here's some more data on remodeling activity from Harvard University. 2020 is a projection here. But again, it shows the pro-cyclical nature of home improvements and repairs. So, this thing peaks during the fourth quarter of 2006, this index at least, or this measure, I should say. It's actually in dollar values. The fourth quarter of 2006, then we enter the recession. Things flatten out, 2010, 2011, and then we take off to, basically all-time highs in terms of homeowner improvements and repairs. That's how we were coming into 2020. And you can see Harvard's forecast for 2020, it was going to be a good year. But, late in December, this coronavirus breaks out in China and the world changed. So conclusion, hey, recession is here. It's here. I think the worst of it is likely to be short-lived, 6 months, it's a guess. Why is that? Why do I think it's going to be short and vicious as opposed to long and vicious? Because I have faith in the geniuses, the brilliant minds in the global life sciences community. There are folks at Regeneron and Gilead and Merck and Pfizer and other biotechnology companies or pharmaceuticals working on a cure. We got through H1N1, we got through Ebola, we got through SARS, we got through MERS. Financial markets obviously already hammered, consumer confidence hammered, business confidence hammered. All that translates into less expenditure and people clutching to cash, holding on to cash as best as they can. I'm quite sure there's some folks out there who rush to ATMs just to have some cash in the house. Just they're so concerned that the ATMs are going to run out of money. Just the way people have been nervous about hand sanitizer running out, which they in fact have. Obviously, the travel and gathering industry is most likely to be impacted, but every sector will be hit, including energy and home remodeling. We know that oil prices have sunk recently below $25 a barrel in North America. Natural gas, I just checked, is around $1.65 per million BTU. That's going to, and a lot of those companies in the oil patch or working in natural gas are heavily indebted. That's part of that fragility. So corporate bankruptcy activity will surge. There's talk about Hilton hotels being in trouble. You heard about JetBlue. Obviously, Boeing needs a bailout, apparently. Major energy companies like Occidental Petroleum want to cut their dividends. So, and as corporate bankruptcy, persists, begins in earnest, what's going to happen? Lending is going to soften. People are going to be scared to make loans in this environment. So you get a credit crunch. Good news, federal stimulus package is on the way, but election year politics complicate the response. These are going to be tough times. The good news is when we come back, we're going to come back very, very strong. Thanks a lot for the opportunity to be with you today, and I look forward to answering your questions. And at this point, I will give it back to our moderator to speak. Our moderator, please take control back.
Yep, thanks, Anirban. And you can actually give me control. So as soon as it prompts you to do so, or you can just check my name and.
Yep, I've done that, I think. I've pressed it, and you should be good to go.
Try one more time for me, if you don't mind.
Okay,
yeah, just go to my name on the right-hand side.
Right. Okay, let's see. Attendees. You have disappeared. You have disappeared. Your name has disappeared. Right. It was there before. And your name somehow.
Attendees.
Attendees. Yep. Okay, attendees. Got it.
Yep, Walker. There you go. Gotcha.
All right. Okay.
Yeah, there we go. Anirban, thanks again. And again, Anirban Basu is Chairman and CEO of Sage Policy Group. Thank you for your time today and really just great information, great insight into some of the economic impact of what we're going to go through here. So with that, I want to switch gears a little bit. I'd like to bring in our next speaker, Aaron Magden. And again, Aaron's president and co-founder of Window Nation. a little bit more color about Window Nation. Obviously, they're the fifth largest home remodeling company in the U.S. 22 offices, over 11 markets, 485 employees. So just a real leader in this space in terms of size, volume, but also best practices, and a real thought leader in terms of how to grow and scale a successful business. 2019 revenues in excess of 200 million. So Aaron's really at the helm of that for Window Nation. So what we'd all love from Aaron today is just to go through and get your thoughts on a couple of different things in terms of reaction management, change management, given all the things that Mr. Basu went through and all the things that we're hearing in terms of the economic climate and how we're all thinking about adjusting our businesses to sort of weather this storm. We'd love your thoughts on a couple key areas. And I think the first would just be how to market. So if you could just provide some thoughts on, Aaron, how you'd recommend businesses sort of go to market today, how to generate leads, how to keep the top of the funnel full.
Yeah, thanks. And great content. I don't want to botch up your name, so Mr. Basu. The first thing I just wanted to preface this, what comes to mind is, I always think I'm a big fan of boxing, and the thing that pops up is, everyone has a plan until they get punched in their mouth. And I think that's what just happened to us. It's like we had this plan for the year, and then bam, we get hit with this coronavirus, and we're all looking at different ways on how to tackle this. And, how do we go to market? I know we have a lot of different companies on this call. Some specialize in canvassing, some specialize in TV, radio, print. And I just wanted to hit on a handful of these so you guys could be prepared on how to handle these different, marketing means. Canvassing, I think it's time to call an audible. People do not want us at their doors. I canvass myself, and we shut down the program. I think that we've encountered in many of the people I've talked to, their local authorities, their people are not happy of, especially with social distancing. They don't want people at their door. It's that simple. I mean, I was looking at with the politics these days and people soliciting for, the president and stuff like that. People just do not want people at their door. And I think that's going to be a challenge for a lot of the companies that canvass. My suggestion is, try not to lay those people off. If you have to keep costs in line, but otherwise, repurpose them, have them call rehashes, have them call, resets that you couldn't get a hold of. But it's going to be a tough time for the folks on this call that are canvassing, because people do not want you at that door. I mean, it's for a lot of people that I spoke to in this industry, it's something that you need to really dive into and think about. The people on there for the radio, another tough challenge we're going to go through. Why? People are at home right now. They're not in their car driving to work. They're not sitting home putting on their radio. They're probably streaming, but they're not listening to their radio. So if you've worked TV in the past and you've had have campaigns, you may want to switch to TV if possible, if you could call that audible. And then you have print, but utilize your call center. Obviously you'll have less people answering the phones, but once again, it's an opportunity to call rehashes. It's an opportunity to call previous customers. There's a lot of things you can do to utilize your call center. Like Mr. Basu was saying, we try not to lay off these employees because things are going to turn. We're 3 weeks into it, really. I mean, the first known virus was 4 months ago. So we're 16 weeks into the first known virus in China, but we're really 3 weeks into this pandemic. So as much as possible, for the cost of getting these employees, try your best to keep them, to retain them. So if you go to the next slide.
That's a great segue, Aaron. So talk to us a little bit more about, operationally how to manage your business through this time. So whether it be gaining efficiencies where you can cut costs or try to, do some expense management. Talk to us a little bit about working within the business through this time.
Yeah. So when you have, a lot of people obviously not doing what they're usually doing, or the sales manager slow, or the call center people are slow. It's a great time to work on the various, your sales systems. You could put together, future Canvas programs, developing manuals. There's just so much stuff that you could do to work on the business. So when it is time, because there's going to be a time when it's going to start to get busy, because sometimes in this business, we pull ahead business. Okay, now we're going to look forward to business. Once all this goes away, people are going to start calling, whether it's for windows, siding, decks, baths, whatever it may be. So there's a lot of things that you could be doing to work on the business. And it could either be systems, processes, it could be on your accounting end, whatever it may be. This is a great time to work on that. In terms of downsizing, if you got to do it, you got to do it. Obviously, we're all in here to survive, but the cost of a hire, could be tens of thousands of dollars, and to lose these people, it could be crucial. I'm paying people to stay on board, and having them repurpose and do things. If you could do that, great. If not, try to keep in touch with them, maybe lay them off for a little bit, and try to get them back on board soon, because we know this is going to turn. We know it is. This is a short period of a challenging time, and quite frankly, this is all going to make us stronger. Going through these challenges, if we get through this, it's just going to make us stronger. I've been through the recession of 2008. We've been through all these different viruses. In the home improvement industry, we have an edge. When downturn happens, what ends up happening is the new construction business goes to shit, if you will. The home improvement business usually is able to sustain. Why? People aren't looking to buy new houses. They're looking to stay in their house. They're looking to replace stuff in their house, and you just got to get them to move the needle and get in the door to push that decision.
One thing you mentioned, Aaron, which I think is really important, is working on the business and positioning the business to come out of this better than when you went in. One of those areas, it's not just remote selling. I know that we've got some images up here about remote selling, but it's more so, it's bigger than that. It's what can you work on within the business to strengthen or shore up different functions or different departments so that you are stronger coming out of it. But for the time being, looking at like remote selling, can you talk a little bit about whether it's fully remote selling or fully virtual selling, or whether it's just leveraging technology to make the sales process a bit more hands off from a physical perspective? Have you guys implemented anything like that, or using any tools right now to help make that shift in your sales function?
Yeah, great question. So listen, at the end of the day, obviously, we want to get in the door face to face to close these sales, right? Because they need to touch, feel the product, and it's much harder for them to say no when we're face to face than online. But we're in a situation where, quite frankly, people don't want us in their home. They don't want a stranger in their home that could have this virus, if you will. So the alternative is when you get cancellations, promote the fact that, listen, we could do a virtual appointment. There's so many different satellite imagery, apps out there. I mean, for instance, Eagleview is a great one. You utilize these satellite imageries to take to look at photos of the home, get sizes, and then you do you create a little online presentation and provide them with a quote. Sure, the closing is not going to be the same. You're going to have you're not going to have both parties there probably all the time, but in my thoughts, something's better than nothing. You're at least engaging the customer with something. So I think that in the interim, it's an alternative way to still engage and work with the customer. These people still need the product. Some of the people on this call, you're still maybe busy. The HVAC industry here is still busy. I mean, people have to have heat or air conditioning. So, some of these people are doing great, but some of them, it's challenging. There's a lot of apps out there and different design things that this works great on. I mean, for Provia has a great design tool for doors. I mean, with the technology these days, some of the stuff it could be quite easy to sell. I focus on the window business. There's not a ton of specific tools in general to use, but I mean, leverage everything that you can when doing these virtual meetings.
I want to drill down on one point, Aaron, when it comes to when there are appointments that are kept, right? So you actually do get in front of somebody, whether it's virtually or maybe face to face, to get the conversions from those leads, because even if you do get in the door, there may still be some hesitation given the current economic climate. So can you talk a little bit about some of the best practices that Window Nation employs from a financing perspective or a purchase option perspective when you guys are in the home?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, listen, like Mr. Basu is talking about, stock market's down. People are looking at their portfolios. They're scared, okay? And I'm sure everyone on this phone call is waking up in deep sweats saying, Jesus, where's the money, right? So we want to make this affordable to these folks. We don't want to be talking about the job's $9,875. We want to talk about payments. We want to talk about $88 a month. We got to make it affordable to these people. So, there's a lot of great finance companies out there, and you need to leverage those companies and focus on payments. Okay. I see a lot of companies out there, 12 months, no interest, no payments, 2 years, no interest, whatever it may be. I got news for you. People ain't paying this off in 2 years. Okay. And if you sell it on 2 years, they're going to wake up the next morning and say, holy crap, I got to pay this equals $500 a month. That's another car payment. I can't pay it. So you got to break it down to the ridiculous. And I think you need to just leverage these long-term small payment programs like, 120 months, 140 months. Service Finance is a great program right now where it's 6 months, no interest. So you leverage both things. Listen, you can't put any money down right now, or you don't have the money, or you just, are you going to do this in a few months? Like if 6 months from now, we're in a good place, obviously we're probably going to be in a fine place. Would we be doing business now? Well, yeah. Well, I got a perfect program for you. We have no interest, no payments for 6 months. Then we turn you into a 9.99 loan, and your payment's $68 a month. So you need to leverage these unique programs to help close deals, in the home. And you need to create urgency. Just because you're offering buy two get two free or buy one get one, that's great. But you also have to push that. Why do they need to buy now? I know we all have our little ploys of the initial visit discount and this and that, but you got to go above and beyond that. I mean, I was reading articles about supply chains getting disrupted, raw materials going up. There's a lot of different things out there that could be changing, and you have to relay that to the homeowner. You could call us next week and vinyl could go up 25%, or aluminum could go up X percent. If you call us, the price could be X amount more. You just have to create that doubt with the homeowner, so they say, you know what, maybe today is the time to get it done. So just some food for thought on that.
Yeah, thanks, Aaron. And then with it, I mean, it's everyone is talking about the economic climate, but it really did hit us fast. I mean, everybody, I think for the most part, had a great January, February, right? I mean, we're coming off not record times, but really, really strong numbers coming out of the gate. So sales were made, right? So you had installation scheduled. How can what recommendations did you give for colleagues or peers that are listening in on how to handle requests for cancellation or pushing back on the install date? Can you talk a little bit around that?
Yeah, another great topic. So you're going to close these sales, and then they're going to come out of the ether. They're going to go to work the next day. They're going to be getting coffee. What'd you do last night? Oh, I bought windows. Are you crazy? You bought windows? Or, hey, I bought a new bath. Are you crazy? You bought a bath? The market was down XYZ. So you need to take your time and button up the job and make sure that you know that they're making the right decision, that they're comfortable, and you try to make, basically, in my eyes, is you want to make sure you get these measures set as soon as possible, sort of in order the material, if you will. You got to make sure that people feel like the process is already going, so they feel that they're locked into the project. When people start, waffling, well, listen, we want to cancel, we're afraid to have someone in the house to remeasure this and that, just push it off to a later date, but at least have them secured and let that 3-day, right of rescission, pass. If you have to push back the install date, so be it. I know usually dollars don't go to the bank until it's installed, but having pen to the paper and getting down payments is the name of the game. Otherwise, you're just walking away from deals. And lastly, you got to let the customers know that you're prepared. Listen, I want to cancel the measure. Listen, I can appreciate that, but I want to let you know we're going to come prepared with, booties. We're going to come prepared with a mask. We're going to come this, that, the other. We're following all CDC, regulations, and they got to feel comfortable that you're going to enter into your home. And that's from start to finish. That's from the sales to the measure to the install. So it's important that you hit, all the different aspects in this time.
Thanks, Aaron. And then just in closing, I know that we sort of touched on these things throughout throughout your time with us today. But I do just, if you have any final thoughts around maybe not timelines, but what your sort of vision is of how long this may last. I know you mentioned 6 months at some point, and then how businesses can kind of prepare for rebounding, or how they can start that process now, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I'm not. If I had a crystal ball, I'd be win the lottery and I'd be a gazillionaire. I won't be on this call. So,
right.
But I would say we're looking at 2 to 3 months at least. And quite frankly, unfortunately, some people on this call won't rebound. It's just not sustainable. You keep advertising and advertising, and leads cost $2,000-$3,000 a lead. It's not sustainable, unfortunately. But you just got to do your best to work every lead and work every angle possible. But I'm thinking 2 to 3 months. Mr. Basu may be right. It's like people don't know. Okay, we're going to be in a recession. A lot of times we're already in a recession. It's already happening, right? So we're going through some challenging times. There's no doubt about it. It's something that we've never experienced. If this lasts for 6 months, I can tell you right now, we'll be in a depression, because this is uncharted territories. This is unprecedented, where people are stuck in their homes. Malls are closed, restaurants are closed. Everything's closed. So how even with the stimulus package, okay, you're going to give everybody $4,500 a one-time. That's not going to make a huge impact. So everyone on this call, you just gotta, we're getting punched in the face, like Mike Tyson says, okay, but you got to make sure you have these plans, and you got to just take one day at a time and bob and weave, and make sure that you keep standing up and don't get knocked down. So good luck, everyone. And just, you got to stay strong and keep pushing along.
Thanks, Aaron. Again, Aaron Magden is CEO of Window Nation, and it's awesome to have you on. Insights into how you guys are weathering this storm and best practices you guys are employing. It's very, very valuable to everyone that joined us today. So I can't thank you enough. We're actually we're running a little bit light on time, everybody. So I know that we got a ton of questions that were submitted. We can't even attempt to get to everything, but if you submitted a question, we do have a record of that, and we will follow up and reach out with answers to those questions. I do want to just call out our sponsors one last time before we wrap up today. CompanyCam, Webrunner, Eagleview, and then, of course, Leap. If you have any interest in learning a little bit more about these tools and how contractors are using these tools right now as not only a way to sort of weather this storm, but also in their normal sort of day-to-day growing their businesses, you can either reach out to them directly, or you can submit a question in, and we can make introductions as well. So with that, I just want to thank everybody for joining our webinar today. I also want to thank our two specialists and guest speakers for joining us. Huge shout out to you guys for giving us insight into honestly, quite frankly, a very pressing matter that's on the forefront of everybody's mind. So again, thank you, and good luck out there. And let us know if you have any additional questions. Please submit them into the question box, and we'll get to them post webinar. Everybody will get a recording of this webinar, so don't feel like this is just off into the ether. You'll get that emailed to you within the next 20 or 30 minutes once the video provisions. So again, thanks a lot, and have a good rest of the day. Talk to you soon.